All right, so today we're going to talk about why old bourbon is not necessarily good bourbon. Um, so let's first talk about Pappy Van Winkle, right? Because that's the one everybody knows. People really search for that 20, 22-year-old. They had a 25-year-old. Um, but for me, personally, I find that the sweet spot in bourbon is actually no really older than 12 years old. Once you get past 12 years old, you start it gets a little sketchy on whether or not that bourbon's going to be great or not, and we'll talk about some of the reasons why. First of all, bourbon is done in American oak, right? Brand new American oak. So a huge part of the flavor profile in bourbon is from wood, and that's what you get. That's the flavor you're tasting. That's why it's brown. That's why you get those vanilla flavors. That's why you taste what you're tasting, is because of that oak. So when it sits in when it sits in brand new oak, it just takes on those flavors, especially if you're in a place like Kentucky where you have those extreme weather. So you've got super hot in the summertime and it's expanding and just sucking all of that whiskey into the wood. And then in the wintertime it gets really cold and it shrinks and it pushes all of that whiskey out. So you're getting so much of that flavor. And after about 12 years old, you lose some of those nuances that you get from the proteins of the barrel and the vanilla and all of that stuff. And just like a tea bag, think of it like a tea bag. It starts to get bitter after a while if you let it sit in there for too long, and that's exactly what happens to whiskey when it sits in oak for too long. So I know that people search for these whiskeys, and you think about with Scotch and why you're able to get a 25-year-old Scotch and it still be delicious. A huge reason for that is one of the weather profile in Scotland is much different than Kentucky, but also because they're almost always using second-use barrels. So think about it as a tea bag. When you grab a tea bag again after it's already been used, it takes a lot longer for those flavor profiles to come out if you're seeping it, because that tea bag's already been used. And that's the exact same thing with a second use barrel like sherry. Like Macallan is a great example. They use sherry cask barrels. So for me, the sweet spot is anywhere between 6 and 12 years old. That's my personal sweet spot. Russell's Reserve is such a fantastic example of the exact sweet spot of where a bourbon should be. I'm gonna taste it. Oh my god, that's so good. You get all the caramel flavors, the vanilla, everything. It's beautiful. Perfect.